All right, guys. Welcome to the live. I've got Gary from Paramount Tactical Solutions here, and we're going to do a little bit of a live stream and asking some questions. So if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments down below, and we'll try to answer them the best we can. So Gary, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Gary Melton. I'm the owner of Paramount Tactical Solutions, and I guess just a little background on me. I did come from the military. Most of my time was in special operations. I spent about 11 years in the military. 9/11 happened. I was living in Beaumont, Texas. That's where I grew up. 9/11 happened. I had a wife and kids and family at the time, and was doing other things. And I decided after 9/11 I was going to go do something about it. So I went and joined the military. A couple days later, after 9/11, I was in the recruiting station. I originally was infantry. I was a sniper team leader with the initial push into Iraq. While I was out there, I got to work with some special operations folks. All these guys running around with beards and cool vehicles and cool guns. So I got back from that deployment at the beginning of 2004 after 13 months there, and then went to selection, passed, ended up at 1st Special Forces Group, where I did another 3 combat tours, multiple training missions. Continued to be there for a while. Then at the end of 2011, I got out of active duty, and I took a job with a federal agency as a special tactics instructor. Was there for several years. I later on became a unit chief for another training program there. And in 2014, I got tired of being told what to teach by the federal agency that I worked for, so I decided to open up Paramount Tactical Solutions. In 2015, that was our first training season. And yeah, man, it's kind of been going on from there. So we've continued to grow. Just during COVID was when I really I was really hesitant to get into the YouTube scene. Wasn't a big fan of really what was represented by the tactical community, if you will say, on YouTube. I was really turned off by that, and again, very hesitant to do that. But with COVID, I had a lot of clients that couldn't travel, couldn't do things. A lot of our clients are from out of town, and they were asking me to do something, right? So decided to start doing some YouTube stuff. That kind of took off more than I thought it would, and we've been kind of going ever since. So trying to put out good content by people with real experience. Myself, almost all my instructors are former special operations veterans. The ones that aren't have a very high level career, have good, they have operational experience along with instructor experience. All the guys that work for me are professional instructors. They either work for federal agencies teaching tactics, firearms, or medical, or they are with the military and are military instructors. So that's kind of where we're at, man.
That's quite a resume. So, all right, guys. So we're gonna get right into it. So Gary, one question. So I do a lot of reloading. We do a lot of live reloading here.
Yep.
And so one question is that'll come out of here is, do you reload?
So I do reload, probably not regularly. I'm looking over here at my reloading bench. I probably got about $6,000 or $7,000 worth of reloading gear that I honestly rarely use. So for those of you who don't know, I do still work for the government. I still travel a lot for the government, doing security work overseas. So between running a business and running courses, running an online store, doing private training, doing consulting work, I actually just don't get a lot of time to reload. And honestly, the way I feel about it, especially with like some of the Hornady ELD stuff, man, I get such good results just right out of the box that it almost, from a time standpoint, didn't make a lot of sense to me. To get fractionally better, to spend a lot more time doing it. Now, I will say things are starting to change, it looks like, if we can ever get primers back in stock. Just from being able to find ammo, 6.5 is really tough for us to find. We're a full FFL Class 3 dealer, so we have access to all the distributorships, all the places that dealers and stores would get ammo from, and 6.5 is really tough to find right now. And I will also say, as much as prices have went up, it's starting to make more sense from a price standpoint to start reloading. So if I can ever get some primers in, I think reloading is something I'll start doing. If nothing else, to make sure that we have a backup because one of the challenges right now with our long range courses is just people finding ammo. So I don't reload as much now as I'd like to. I enjoy reloading, and I definitely that's something I plan on getting a little bit more invested in the future. That's for sure.
Gotcha. So I do a lot of reloading for the competitive matches that I shoot. So that kind of draws me there. I reloading bench next to me. There's a lot of stuff. So there's that aspect. But so do you shoot competitively? I know you're an instructor.
No, I don't shoot competitively. Going back to that time thing, one of my goals when I started this company, I had this grandiose thought that, I'll open up a training company, and I'll be able to, do all this additional, start shooting competition more often, both long range and tactical carbine, handgun, whatever it is. And I'm just poor on time, man. I try to shoot as often as I can. I got a 100-yard range in my backyard, which some of you have probably seen on some of our videos. I actually have a world-class long-range facility accessible to me. It's where we do our long-range courses. We can shoot out to 1,400 yards. But no, to answer your question simply, no, I don't. And I think our goal is to get to a point to where we're doing this full time, and we're right on the cusp, if you will. We're now making enough and generating enough income to where we can do this full time. And there again, my grandiose thought is I'll be able to have the time to be able to do that, to be able to shoot competitively. PRS is something that I'm very interested in. I want to get into heavily, but again, that might be another pipe dream as well, because running a business, doing everything that we do, it just ends up being what it is.
It is, and it's rough. I get it. But you and I linked up together with this rifle.
Mm-hmm.
We both have the same rifle, so they're almost identical.
Yep.
So I think our optics are the only difference. And the weight. And it's because I shoot very. But so one thing that I really kind of harp and preach on my channel is fundamentals. And how do you feel fundamentals play into as going as a student to a training facility and getting training from an instructor like yourself, or from a practice standpoint? How much do fundamentals play a role in that? I know I preach them all the time, and I'm always harping fundamentals. But from the instructor standpoint, what's one big thing from the fundamentals that you see people need to practice a lot, and how much of a role they play?
Yeah, so let's just take that from the beginning there. So first of all, high performance shooting is nothing more than applying the fundamentals, several fundamentals in multiple situations, combining them, and then being able to actually execute them under stress, right? So that's really, when you talk about a high performance shooter, you take every component that they're doing, and all of those is very basic shooting, but they're just able to do several different basic tasks, put them together, string them together, and make them work. And that's where people, what we would call like non-high performance shooters, they're not able to do that. We may be able to, and it goes back to not just competition, but like, we just finished up an hour ago. I was on the range teaching tactical carbine, and what we focus on is not just shooting holes in paper. Really, what I train people on is defensive tactics and really how to win a gunfight, right? That's my focus. And it goes back to the exact same thing is basic being able to apply those fundamentals at a subconscious level. And that's part of the problem. And going back to what you said, from an instructor standpoint to people out there practicing, folks, I can't stress enough how important it is to get competent instruction. And again, it goes back to operational experience and professional instruction experience. There's a big difference between somebody teaching you a skill that they are good at and they have that operational experience. There's lots of guys that I know in special operations everywhere else. They're some of the best shooters you'll ever see on the face of the planet, but they can't teach themselves how to have a wet paper bag. There's in myself and the other instructors that I employ, we've all trained thousands and thousands of people, right? So there's nothing that you can do that we haven't seen before, and we know how to teach you something and get people to apply that skill set very quickly, much more efficiently. So, when some people are very hesitant to spend, a few $100s, $300, most of our courses are $300 a day essentially. And they're like, oh my God, it's so expensive. But the amount of leap forward that you make by getting that professional instruction, because here's one thing, you can say that you know the fundamentals, but then you get down there and you apply it and you have somebody like me kind of pick that apart and be like, hey, look, I know you think you're doing this. I know you think your trigger squeezes are good, but it's not. And here's what you're doing wrong and here's how to fix it. So, the fundamentals are key. And the problem is when people try to self-teach themselves, what they end up doing, they get a lot of repetitions at doing it wrong. So you're just getting really, really good at doing it incorrectly. And, we have clients that come to all of our, we have a level 1, level 2, level 3 courses, whether it's about handgun, carbine, long range. And, we have clients that come to every single level 1 course that we have that are unbelievable shooters because, and I can't speak for everybody, and this goes back to professional instructors, but, we push each one of our clients individually. The experience that a person has on the range with us that has never shot a gun before versus a person that is basically a high performance shooter, both of them are going to improve vastly, but their experiences are also vastly different. So, that is the fundamentals. Everything's the fun. It's all shooting is the fundamentals, and that's the thing is being able to apply those fundamentals while you're doing many other things, while you're analyzing something, while you're analyzing an environment, making good decisions, whether it's tactical decisions or good decisions on a target field for competition. I mean, that's, the fundamentals are absolutely everything, but you need some sort of diagnostic feedback, whether that be an instructor or something like the Mantis. There's a couple other, training aids out there that I think are very powerful tools that give you the real information that you need to know that you're applying those correctly. Because there again, I've had clients I've taught on the range, and they come back a month later and they're like, Gary, man, I'm gonna do a lot better because I've been dry firing every single day, and come to find out they do a lot worse because they've been dry firing every single day, and all they've done is gotten really, really good at doing something really, really bad. So you need some sort of diagnostic feedback that tells you what's going on.
I'm 100% in agreement with you. MC has a great question here. So I come from a firearm or a law enforcement background. I was a firearms instructor for the law enforcement agency that I worked for. I was a firearms instructor. So I kind of have a different side to this question, but I always found it a lot easier to teach the females that have never shot a handgun or a rifle or a shotgun in their entire life how to teach and how to shoot properly, because they were more open-minded to somebody with actual experience teaching them this. So what about you, Gary? I don't know if you can read this. It says, do you find males or females have smoother ability to learn and follow through with proper fundamentals?
Yeah, I see it. No, I'm agreeing. I'm in agreement with you. I think naturally, all things being equal, I think women are better shooters, and maybe it is because they are better at taking instruction and following directions and being mindful of that, and not having as much ego. I think it's especially true when it comes to shooting in general. Um, Men coming in there with some ego, not necessarily even ego, like, hey, I'm so good. They're more afraid of looking bad. Whereas women typically don't come in there with I mean, some do. Some are very kind of trepidatious and have some stress and anxiety when it comes to that. But we keep things light. We try to break that ice. But I think generally women are definitely more receptive to instruction. There's almost no doubt about that. But I think also just from a physiological standpoint, I think women have the potential to be better shooters than men in a lot of different areas.
I'm in complete agreement with you. I've seen some of these women at these PRS matches that have run stages so clean and so quick and so smooth that it's like, man, what am I doing wrong? Because there's times at matches where I feel like I have two left feet, and it's like Mark here. Him and I went out to the range today, and we're working. He's trying to get into. I'm trying to get him into PRS. Let me rephrase this. He's not exactly 100% sold yet, but we were working on moving and things like that. And the you take somebody like Mark that has great fundamentals. I mean, great fundamentals. Shoots good, controls his breathing, gets behind his rifle properly. Then you start putting that moving aspect in there. It threw him a little bit for a loop. And but it was great to see him recover from that and still be a great shot and learning. There's a lot to learn there. So Mark was really enjoying in a lot of enjoyment shooting with Mark today at the range. So
Yeah, again, going back to the fundamentals, we need to get to a point to where, because here's the reality. I mean, just for instance, just going over some examples over the last couple of days, you take somebody that can shoot pretty good standing still, and then you throw in a string of fire, right? Instead of shooting once, now we're going to shoot like a rhythm drill of 5 rounds. Well, suddenly, those things start falling apart because we're adding on to those basics. Even when we break down, if we break down the fundamentals, right? Body position, sight alignment, sight picture, breathing, trigger squeeze, and follow through. Those are basically how I teach fundamentals. You can throw in some subcategories in there if you want, but I think ultimately that's whether we're shooting pistol, rifle, or long gun, long range. That's essentially what we're talking about. Well, the problem is that we think about that as a linear. We start thinking about it like, all right, my body position is good. My sight alignment, sight picture is good. Now my breathing's good. Now my trigger squeeze, and then follow through. And you think about those individually, but the reality is that all of those have to converge and being applied simultaneously as that trigger's pulled, right? And then follow through obviously goes post trigger pull. But the moment that we start, and even as a new shooter, you see this as a new shooter, and it gets more complex as we go into more advanced shooting per se. But as a new shooter, they may be having trouble with trigger squeeze, but they got body position, breathing, and everything else. So you start concentrating on trigger squeeze because you're screwing that up. Next thing you know, now you're breathing while you're pulling the trigger. And now we have vertical deviation. So it's being able to understand that you have to be able to do all those things, and you got to get enough repetitions to where you don't have to think about those things before we add another task. The moment that we add another task, it starts to affect those things that were just barely under the best conditions. We can make those work, but now you add something else like shooting on the move, use of cover, whatever it is, having to shoot multiple targets, having to change positions while we're trying to identify a target, whatever it is. But the moment you add something else, that identifies the fact that those fundamentals aren't at a level of subconscious that they need to be.
I I will be in agreement with that 100%. And I'm guilty of doing some of those things myself because I get sloppy on some of my fundamentals, and I'm just as guilty as the next guy. We all do it. But so that what gear have you seen people use where they felt like it would buy them accuracy or it would buy them a skill set, when in all reality, fundamentals is really what hindered them, what not their gear, or vice versa.
You can go all day into that, right? So, I mean, anything, um, whether we're talking about, I mean, honestly, anybody that gets a new piece of gear, I don't care if it's a holster, I don't care if it's new knee pads, I don't care what it is. Suddenly, you think it's going to give you some sort of performance edge when it doesn't. A great concept of this is the fact that when I first started doing some YouTube stuff on here, I was really focusing on tactics and shooting tips and tricks and training stuff and all that stuff. And that doesn't get hits, that doesn't get views. What gets views is gear reviews, right? So what I've tried to do is use that bait of a gear review and make sure that I'm prefacing either at the beginning of the video, but always at the end of the video, hey, gear's great, but what really will help you is training. And we'd love to have you come out and train with us. We'd love to meet you in person. It's always my closeout. I don't even know if people make it that far in videos, but people always think that gear is going to give them an advantage. Probably the best example of that, to answer your question more directly, is triggers, right? People think if we put a new trigger in there, it's suddenly going to solve our shitty trigger squeeze. Well, it doesn't, right? So a lot of times people are better off having, a subpar trigger and be able to work through that, master the trigger squeeze and follow through, and then get a new trigger, and then you'll see a performance improvement. Because if you're slapping a crappy trigger, you're going to slap the trigger. So people all rely on gear, and gear has its place, no doubt about it. Where I'm a big, it irritates me, people running around with a concealed carry gun, for instance, without a light on your gun. Like, you can't identify a target, you can't make good shooting decisions. Most of the time that you're most likely you are to get into a threatening engagement with a firearm is probably going to be either hours of darkness or an area where that's dimly lit or lit, whether that be inside of a structure or anything else. So, definitely gear has its place. People are always going to be more drawn to gear than fundamentals. And that's just the reality of it. And that's just something I've come to learn to accept.
Oh, I'm in complete agreement with you. Um, I'm I'm a little guilty about not having a flashlight on my concealed carry. However, I do always keep a flashlight in my pocket, and it's just how I was taught when I was going through firearms courses before I became a firearms instructor with the department I was with. We were always taught one hand flashlight, one hand pistol. If you lose your pistol, you can fight with a flashlight. You can fight with your hand.
About the ultimate concealed carry gun. Until recently, it was almost impractical to carry a light on a subcompact or compact gun because the lights were so big. Now we have smaller lights, and maybe I won't say that somebody not carrying a concealed gun without a light, but even people that have home defense guns, most of them don't have a light on their gun. You got to have a light on your gun, and also if you know how to use that with some training, a light gives you so much tactical advantage. If you know how to use that correctly, how to keep on the whole time, also incorporate movement, lateral movement to a threat. There's so many things that can give you such a huge tactical advantage that will almost guarantee your survival if it implemented correctly. And on a pistol, whether it's a range pistol or home defense pistol or whatever else, having that extra weight on the gun, especially where that weight is located, also reduce muzzle flip, reduce recoil. So the advantages of it, using it, training with it, and making sure you're getting the right one. But I will say now, at this point, with some of these smaller subcompact lights that are, powerful lights, well, it's upstairs, but on my subcompact, I just did a video on that 365 with the TLR7 sub. It's a 500 lumen light, and the thing's this big. Now there's really no excuse not to have a light on you at all times. And you're right, a lot of people do fall back to, carrying a tack light on them, which makes sense if you don't have something to attach to your light. But we know, especially if you've done any shooting with a handheld light, how unsteady that shooting position is. And now, especially if you are trying to clear a structure and now you have a light in one hand and a gun in the other, and now you come into a close encounter where you go hands on, that's a good way to lose your gun. So, anyways, but that's just one area where gear does matter, right? So gear, but we just gotta make sure that we put it in the right context and put it in the right priority, because training is always going to give you the best, whether you're looking for performance in competition or just being able to make sure that you can defend yourself competently. Training is always going to be where it should be where the emphasis is. There's no doubt about it. And just as the consumer gluttons that we are, that's just not how it usually turns out.
Oh, I agree. Do you feel somebody can go too bright with a light on a self-defense, in-home defense type firearm? Let's say somebody's home is like mine where they have white drywall behind them. Do you think they can go too bright to where they cause vision issues to themselves?
Now, I hear that argument all the time, and I've cleared thousands of structures both in operations and in training. And I hear about splashback all the time, how splashback's going to blind you. And I've never, and I've tried it. And now you say that, that's a video I need to make. Uh, Other than shining a light directly in your eyes with a mirror, I don't get that. I've never seen it. I've shined. We were at a shoot house. I was doing a CQB course in Moorfield, West Virginia at Panthera, and one of the students brought that up, and just so happened one of the rooms there was like it was really like kind of a holding area before you went to the actual ballistic portion. It was nothing but like glossy, the cheap drywall, and so we went in there, shot the lights, and I'm like, shine the light on the wall, like look at it. I mean, this is one of those things that gets propagated in theory. I don't know how it continues to have legs, because if you actually do it, I've been in lots of situations where my light wasn't bright enough. There hasn't been a single time spending thousands of hours clearing rooms that I've ever ran into a situation where like, oh man, you know what, this light's too bright. I mean, I got 1,000 lumens on my rifle over there. I've never seen it too bright. I've never had a problem where I get the splashback and I'm like, my eyeballs. No, never happened.
No, that makes sense. I didn't I didn't know. Uh, because you do hear that misconception. Now, I've never seen it. Maybe some other people have. I personally haven't, but and that's with hands-on experience with it like yourself. I've never physically seen a splashback on a white wall. And it's out there like when people start talking about cloud defense, they start talking about streamlight, so on and so forth, 5,000 lumens, crazy numbers like that. And they're like, oh, I'm going to get blinded.
I mean, I'm sure there is a lumen limit to where that does happen, but I mean, I don't know of any, you know, uh, significant again, when it comes to tack lights for rifles, I typically stick to Surefire. I've done a lot of testing, and that's so this is the other thing too I always find funny is, I've been in the military since 2003, was in special operations since 2005, have continued to train tactical teams going overseas for many years after I got out of the military, and since 2014, 15, I've been, training people uh, almost every weekend and many times during the week with private training, and I've trained law enforcement and special operations units. So, one of the things I think people have this misconception where they see this guy on YouTube and it's like, oh, well, this guy, he's doing this stuff because he's on YouTube. Man, I've been buying and testing gear since I've always been a gear geek. I love new gear. I love new technology. I love all things tactical. And this is what I've been doing since way back when I was testing magazines. And I'll be honest with you, I do this also too. I got more heavy into it when I started this business because of that. I don't get emails constantly about, hey, Gary, what's the best tactic for this? What's the best training method for this? I get emails on gear. So before I started recommending stuff, I'm like, hey, I need to know. I need to stay with what's current. And, magazines, whether it be magazines, I've been testing gear for years, The only difference now is I throw a camera on there, and so I test these things. But going back to the original thought was, I'm sure there is a lumen limit, right? I'm sure there is a point, probably, I don't know, maybe 5,000 lumens is the number that you start shining on walls and it starts affecting your vision. But with what the industry standard for lights are right now is typically around 1,000 lumens. And I remember hearing this argument way back when most rifle lights were like 500 lumens. And they were coming out with more like, oh, there's 1,000 lumen light coming out. Well, that's too bright. Well, how do you know it's too bright? Have you used 1,000 lumen light on your gun? And now having used, it's actually, I think with certain batteries it's 1,200 lumens, which is the ones I use. So I'm probably pushing around 1,200 lumens, and I can get right up against that wall, a white wall, and turn it on 3 feet away. And it's not, I mean, any turn a light on in darkness, it's going to affect your sun, but it's not going to impair you in any way like it would. I mean, when you're bouncing off that white wall, 1,000 lumens, I'd like somebody do the science behind there and figure out how much of that percentage wise is hitting you. And not only is it hitting you directly, it's dispersed because of the nature of light and hitting the wall. So now we have 1,000 lumens that's dispersed. It's not coming back to you directly. So again, I'm sure there is a number. But what most people are putting on their rifles, I don't know of any rifle lights that aren't like some crazy like Chinese brand that does some weird stuff that you can actually mount to your rifle and have 5,000 lumens. I'm not aware of any. If there are, somebody throw that in the comments and make a comment about that. But my light is 1,400 lumens, and there's even still sometimes, you know what? I'd love another 1,000 lumens on there.
Yeah, I was kind of just adversarially throwing that number out. I really don't know if there's a 5,000 lumen weapon light or not, but you never know. What gear do you recommend somebody carrying for, let's say they're coming for one of your gas rifle matches, one of your CQB or defensive rifle matches? What rifle do you suggest somebody to use or get or be adequated with, if that makes sense?
So coming to training for like a attack carbine course, or are we talking about a long range course, or what do you mean specifically?
Carbine.
Okay. You know, the thing with ARs today is that they have been there's so much competition out there that, man, you have such a choice of competent and good ARs, right? So, I mean, you can buy really good ARs for, you know, 7, 8, $900. You know, what I would say is inadequate when we start getting into the polymer frames. I've seen several of those where clients have brought those to courses and they'll fail. I actually bought a batch of polymer framed, and again, this is way before my YouTube days, but just because Gary's curious, and I heard all these people buying these polymer frames, so I bought several polymer lowers, and I was going to test them in different areas and see if they could hold up to a standard aluminum receiver on an AR. And I remember the first one I put together, I put you know, the gas tube on. I put it all together. I was just putting on an upper that I already had assembled. So I assembled the lower, put it on there. I went out to the range and I shot like 30 rounds. And I noticed like suddenly the buffer tube was making funny noises. And what I realized was just the recoil, because it had polymer threads where the buffer tube went into, and those threads had actually started punching through. So it was actually pop, 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 pop. So now I had no threads, and that buffer tube was just sticking in there. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of the first example off the top of my head. So it's not so much what I recommend, as long as the rifle works. There's so many, there's not only good rifles out there that are cheap, that are holds up. You know, a good example, I guess, is Aero Precision. Aero Precision used to be considered a budget rifle. We're a direct Aero Precision dealer just because I think that Aero Precision, I have several student guns over there that we use that are Aero Precision, and man, they perform as good as any $3,000 rifle. And the fit and finish on them is great. I mean, they're an underpriced bargain ultimately. But honestly, like I said, almost all the ARs in general are really good these days. I'm sure there's exceptions to that rule, some, you know, cheap, no-name brands. But the other part of that is what I always try to tell people is, treat if you're going to have a firearm or even firearm accessories, treat it like a life critical uh, piece of equipment that it is, right? So, when it comes to firearms and body armor, that's probably not the place where you want to bargain basement hunt. We don't want to buy the cheapest crap that we can. Um, but obviously, there's a usually a price point where you can buy really good stuff and not get into like Gucci gear just for the sake of getting. I have my home defense rifle. Matter of fact, this one. I was down here showing. So this is the. All right, so this is actually my home defense rifle. This is what I built specifically for home defense. Right, we got 1,000. That right there is 1,000 lumens, and it's not. And it's actually showing less bright than it is there. But this is my home defense rifle, and this was kind of my Gucci build. I probably got, I don't know, it has a $300 Lancer bolt in it. We got the top of the line, one of the Rainier Arms billet receivers, upper and lower. Has a super lightweight, wider rail that will accommodate a suppressor. So, I probably got, I don't know, I probably, not including the suppressor, there's probably almost $2,000 into this rifle, and I built it in a bunch of Gucci hardware. $350 elephant trigger. So there's a lot of stuff to this, but again, this was a rifle that I was building to make sure that it didn't fail. But I can build a rifle that's just as good, that will work just as well for half that price. So you don't have to spend a lot, but you need to buy smart and you need to be a well-educated buyer. And that's where I think some of the gear reviews that we do benefit people. I mean, because again, I don't put out anything that I don't believe in. And same thing with our website. Anything that is on our website that we sell, we've tested that stuff. And unlike most people that have a website where they sell stuff or have a YouTube channel, 90% of my sales come from clients that I'm training with, and I have to look them in the eye and say, hey, this is the gear. And not only that, I have to take them out on the range and have them use that gear in front of me. And if it fails, well, they're going to look me in the eye and be like, hey, what'd you sell me over here? So, that's what we do. We test gear, and nothing on our website is anything that we haven't personally have used, tested, and not just me. Again, I have a whole cadre of guys. I'm like, hey, man, try this handgun out, try this sight out, see what you think about it. And if we come to a consensus, generally, I know it's a good piece of kit.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. So I've got Daniel Defense rifles that I absolutely love. They're in gas. They're 5.56 rifles. I absolutely love them, but they failed not as many times as, let's say, my arrows have, or my Anderson manufacturer, or my Palmetto State, or my BCMs. They've all failed. They all have that breaking point. The breaking point might be a little further than the other, but they all have had some type of failure, whether to feed, whether to extract, stovepipe, busted, ripped the head off of a case, something. So I'm in agreement with you on that. Like, you can't buy ultimate reliability.
Yeah, and part of that too is that's you bring up another good point. This is a system, right? So we have the ammo, we have the magazine, we have the sight, we have other components, and the rifle, and this whole thing is a system. And it's only as strong as the weakest link in that system. And that's another thing where I see people out on the range. They're buying $3,000 and $4,000 guns. They got all kinds of Gucci gear, but they're buying the cheapest magazines that they can find or whatever else. And now they're constantly having double feeds, or I'd say 98% or more of all malfunctions with an AR, if it's a quality gun, come from the ammo and or the magazine. So that's where the failure points are, and that's where people tend to spend the least amount of money or try to buy like the cheapest junk possible. Uh, Great example of this was a guy on the range. He had a really nice rifle, had all the right kit, but he had a bunch of steel cased ammo, and we got nothing but malfunction after malfunction, failure to fire, failure to extract, all these issues, and it was all ammo related. I'm like, man, look, if you want to get some training in today, you need to do yourself a favor and go put that cheap ammo away, and get some good ammo. That way we can actually train here. And he saw it and he knew it. And that's another thing too, is like people have all these misconceptions about even their personal gear, how well it works. Or people say, they'll get out there on the range and some piece of equipment's failing. They're like, well, man, I've never had that problem before. Well, this is the first time in a day you shot 500 rounds in a day that that you're putting it through more realistic scenarios as opposed to sitting on your back porch or sitting on a static range shooting at a piece of paper. You've never had to shoot at a high rate of fire. You've never had to shoot in multiple shooting positions. You've never had to do this. That gun's never been tested. That equipment's never been tested. So until you get it out there and you put it in real world conditions, you don't know. And that's even when I do YouTube reviews or whatever else, if I kind of give a bad review on an item, people are like, well, that has never happened to me. Well, you haven't put 500 rounds through it in a day. You don't know. It's not happened to you because you never ran it gear hard. Or maybe you just got lucky and got a really good one. I don't know.
Well, it's like my race pistol or race pistols I use in IDPA and IPSC. I mean, you're talking $3,000-$4,000 pistols, and they've been ran hard, they've been put away wet, but they get their maintenance like they're supposed to. But as expensive of a pistol as that is, they've still failed. This rifle right here, when I initially got it, so I had one of the very first runs straight from Daniel McElroy and Jason Land. They sent it over to me. And I got one of the first runs when the extractors were bad in this rifle. And there's nothing more frustrating than being at a match and your extractor not work. And you're like, what the hell? Thankfully, I always keep a paint can opener in my pocket on my keychain, just out of sheer habit, where I can gash rifles. If I need to get a case out, I can with the paint can opener. Bolt actions, I can do it, so on and so forth. So, I mean, it is what it is. It was frustrating, but they took care of me on it. They got me springs and extractors over that next day. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I mean, parts are going to fail, and that's one of the things that I always am very careful about. When it comes to doing these YouTube videos, the last thing that I want to do. Look, most companies are trying to do the right thing, right? So, and anytime that you mass produce anything, you're going to run into some issues. And I don't know if you ever followed my kind of Savage. I had a kind of a series on the Savage 110 Elite up there.
So
But
this is a series I got into on.
I'm sorry, what did you say about that?
The Delta 5 Pro is a series that I got in
Gotcha.
to your channel.
Yeah, so prior to the video I did on the Daniel Defense, probably 6-8 months before that, I did an entire series on the Savage Elite 110 over there. And initially, that rifle changed how I did things on this channel a lot. So number one, when I first got that in, I was excited about the rifle. I was very impressed with the features versus the price of the rifle. And I basically did a real big overview of just the features without any performance testing on that rifle first, which I think standalone it's fine. I prefaced that on the video. I'm like, look, folks, I haven't shot this yet, but let's go over these features. Da, 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 da. Well, a month later or a couple weeks later, I was able to get out to the range, started doing some shooting, started running some major cycling issues, and then I found out that was a pretty common problem. And then, of course, I get clients or people on YouTube saying, hey, Gary, hey, I bought this rifle because of your review. And essentially, even though I made sure that I was very specific in saying, look, I'm not endorsing this rifle. I'm just telling you what you're getting for the money right out of the box. It was basically an unboxing, if you will, of a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ran into all kinds of issues. And then I started talking to people. People were contacting me saying, hey, I'm having the same issues. And come to find out, that rifle was just plagued with cycling issues, specifically and strangely specifically to 6.5. Most guys that got it in 308 weren't having the issues. Some of the guys that got it in 338 weren't having the issues. I don't know if they chambered it in 6 Creedmoor or not, but specifically, almost everybody were having issues with 6.5, while not having issues with 308. Although some people have contacted me and said they did have some issues, but more so the guys that had it in 6.5. And they said they contacted Savage, and basically kind of got the runaround. Savage was not receptive to it and was not willing to fix it, and that's where I kind of went on a rampage with Savage. I'm like, look, here's what's going on with this rifle, and here's why I will not recommend Savage ever again. And it was also where I made the decision, hey, I'm not putting anything up on YouTube that I haven't already, or at least I'm not taking you along the ride with the performance part of it too. It's not fair for me to either the company or the person watching the videos to basically see a half done review, right? And so yeah, you got to be careful about all that stuff.
Oh, I'm in full agreement. So there's a guy that's actually on my channel that he's got the Savage 110 Elite in the MDT ESS chassis in 338 Lapua, and we've been in contact of things that have been needed to be fixed, and I've told him how to fix them via over the phone. So I do have my Master Armor certs, so I am technically a Master Armor. So I cut my own barrels for like my dash for my GT and stuff like that. I cut my own barrels and my 6.5 Grindle. So those are all hand cut, hand lapped by myself. Just for me, I don't really sell barrels. But and I was telling him how to fix some of the issues with it, and he was telling me when he got his ESS chassis, that almost every single one of his screws were loose on his chassis. Did you have that issue with yours also?
With the Savage Elite, the chassis screws being loose.
Hmm.
I don't know, but I'll tell you, anytime I get a rifle in, I usually take those things all apart and I will throw some Vibratite on them, and I make sure they're torqued to spec, and especially your scope bases. If you have removable scope bases, the first thing that I'm always going to do is take those out. I'm going to degrease those and I'm going to torque those to spec, because just going back over almost 20 years of long range shooting, I can't tell you how many times we've been out on the range and suddenly we're having a massive impact shift, and we're spending hours trying to diagnose and troubleshoot a rifle, and come to find out after it's all said and done, the last thing you end up checking is the base, and the base has come loose. So I don't remember that being the issue. The issue's always been a cycling issue with that. And strangely enough, again, I got a video of it where, for some reason, and I still don't have a good answer for it, other than it may have just been too proud. But the what fixed that rifle? First, I got a new extractor and ejector. I put that in there. That didn't really fix the rifle, or I put a new ejector spring in there. That really didn't fix the cycling issue, but what did fix it was actually taking their stock extractor or ejector out and actually beveling the edge of that ejector and actually grinding it down probably like a 10,000th. And that turned it into a different rifle. Strangely enough, so since then, since all these issues I had a client that was she wanted a rifle, and she wanted specifically the Savage Elite. And I'm like, look, I don't really recommend this rifle. I laid out why. She'd already watched the video, so she knew it's what she wanted. So that's what we ordered her. And when I got that in, I mean, it's a completely different rifle from the original. It's almost like a 2.0 version, because so many of the parts are different. The grip is different. The buttstock and the cheek riser are different. There was no cycling issues. I test fired it before I gave it to her. No cycling issues. So Savage clearly fixed some things on it, and they've kind of revamped that rifle entirely, but without much ado, because I think saying that they fix these issues, admits to the issues, because that was the problem. That they wouldn't even admit that there was an issue. People
Mhm.
would send in their rifle and they would say, "Hey, it's we replaced this or we did this." They get it back and the issue still existed, or they wouldn't even respond to their calls. It's really a shame when a company like that isn't going to stand behind their product. And one thing that I think we as a shooting community need to get better at is quit being fanboys over products. I look at all
Mhm.
products very objectively. I'm willing to tell you tomorrow, even a product that I'm heavily invested in, whether it's a brand, whether it is whatever it is, if suddenly their products start to not perform well, um, we got to quit being. We have to be completely objective when it comes to gear. We need to be objective when it comes to a lot of things, whether it's tactics or anything else. But regardless, people get so entrenched, and because they have a good Savage or they have a good rifle, they are now the defense community for something that is clearly. What do you think? Like if you're coming to the defensive Savage and you're like, oh, my rifle's great. I've bought 10 rifles from them. They're great. What do you think? Do you think 100 people on one channel are all making this up? So we got to get out of that mindset of not would be willing to hold companies accountable for putting out garbage.
I I'm in complete agreement that I've I've seen that with so many rifle manufacturers. If you remember when Remington, when the 700s, I want to say it was the Gen 2 700s, they, or not Gen 2, but a few years ago, their 700s just absolutely fell apart. I don't know if you remember that. And guys just still stood behind them, stood behind them. They were great rifles back in their time. But when they started falling apart, they really fell apart. So,
Yeah, no, and again, we can't like, you know, we got to quit being fanboys.
mhm.
It goes back to like the Ford, Chevy, Dodge people. Like Ford puts out some good gear, they put out some really bad stuff. The same thing with Chevy, and just like quit being emotionally attached to name brands or products. Just stop it. It's stupid. And that's how, and that's a good example of a Remington. I would say another good example of that, in my opinion, is Leupold. Leupold has was made some of the best optics on the planet for 10 years ago. They were the only game in town, and they've made some of the best optics out there. Maybe a little more than 10 years ago now, but they really haven't innovated very much, and now they still want high a lot of money for what I think is really a product that's fallen behind as far as features, capabilities, and things like that. So, there's a lot of companies out there that establish a name brand through their good products, and then ride that, and they continue to make garbage to increase their profit margins, and are riding on a legacy of creating good products, and that's what we have to guard against, I think.
Oh, I'm in complete agreement with you. I mean, I've seen rifle scopes come and go in my years that I've been competing. So anything from when I was in high school shooting trap for my high school trap team, all the way through college when I was shooting on our trap team, when I started at IPSC, got into law enforcement. Now there's optic manufacturers have become one in a dozen. And there's not many that really stand apart from any of the other ones. I am very partial to Vortex and take this for what it is. Like, I'm very partial to Vortex. I love my rep over at Vortex. I've been treated very well by Vortex. So I'm very fortunate for that. But you got companies like Riton, Athlon, Burris, US Optics that are all on the scene now that are just doing phenomenal work.
No, absolutely, and that's something that I kind of had to give myself a little, had to check myself a little bit too, because I've always been a little bit of an optic snob. I just have found that because I've gone down that road, right? So, when Vortex first came out, they were considered at one time kind of a budget optic, and they still have some budget lines of optics, right? Well, I put some of their budget optics on some training guns and things like that, and next thing you know, they were failing. Now, what I will say is, obviously, their Razor line, I mean, they're up there with, as far as performance goes, up there with anybody, Night Force or anybody else. They're heavy. My God, they're heavy. But no, there's no doubt about it. And that's the thing is give every company its due credit, and whatever that due credit is, just be honest with yourself and be honest with other people, and just be as objective as you possibly can be. And I think that's the key to continuing to create an environment or a shooting community of manufacturers and companies in this community that are held to account, that will continue to innovate. Because the moment that you start giving them a pass because of their past, they can't help but take advantage of it. Anybody will. Like, it won't matter if we save a few bucks in this scope, we save a few more dollars in this scope. People are still buying it, and they're buying it based on a legacy that will get to a point that no longer exists.
Nikon.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So I know you've got the MPA there at your shop or your house or anything, wherever. I don't know if you're at the shop or you're at your house. I'm not sure. How have you enjoyed it? Like comparing it to your Delta 5 Pro, how have you enjoyed it?
Sorry. Tomorrow I'm actually going to be shooting that video. So tomorrow, I was planning on doing it tonight, but it's not going to happen tonight. We're going to be mounting an optic onto that gun, and we're gonna run through that together. So we'll do some performance tests on it. We'll do accuracy tests on it. That's my next video. But here's what I already know. Like, I've shot several MPA rifles. I got lots of friends that shoot PRS that are running MPA rifles. You know, MPA with that MPR, that PMR Pro 2, what you get for $2,500 is pretty hard to beat. You're getting button cut rifle, button cut barrel that's hand lapped, inspected. Everyone gets inspected. Everyone comes with barrel chamber dimensions for reloading. Of course, you get the MPA chassis. I would say probably the only thing that may be a little questionable, and I'm waiting to see. It cycles smoothly so far, just running ammo through it that hasn't been shot. But of course, that's always another story when you start actually expanding those brass inside the chamber. I've definitely seen smoother actions. That action is still really good, but it's hard to beat what you're getting for the money out of that. For $2,500, it's tough to beat, and I definitely agree with Mark. That is my mantra: buy once, cry once. Whether it's Night Force collars, we also got a part of that. I'm trying to figure out how I want to do that, but so we got the rifle right here. This is the rifle we'll be doing that whole video series on. It's the MPA PMR Pro 2. It's just what you're getting for the money for basically the same price that I paid for my Daniel Defense Delta 5 Pro. This is the rifle you get, $2,500. It's $150 more for the folding stock. But really, I don't know. So my tan, if you bought the tan Delta 5 Pro, it was like $150 more just to get that color as opposed to black. So you're basically breaking even from this with that up there. And this is a client's gun, just to be clear. And then the optics that we're going to be putting, on it is the Collis I5, I always screw this up, 525i. So it's a 5-25 with the trimmer 3. So I still haven't decided how I was going to do that. If I wanted to do, I'll probably end up doing a review just on the scope, as well as the performance review on the rifle. But I'm pretty stoked about that. I do think I just ordered 3 more MPA PMR Pro 2s. One of them is mine. One of those, 2 of the other ones are for clients. So, I'm expecting good things, but again, you guys will see, and I'll always be honest with anybody that I'm putting content out with. If it fails, I'm ready to drop them tomorrow too. So
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Well, the guys over at MPA, they make a very good rifle. And like Mark said, I'm a huge proponent of buy once, cry once. And today when we were out shooting, Mark runs the exact same optics on his gas rifles and his bolt action rifles with the exact same reticle on the inside of them. This man, and there's something said for that. You memorize one reticle and you go from there, and it's one reticle that you're running. You only have to learn the one. I run the EBR7 reticles on all my stuff, and it's one reticle. It's all in mils. So that's my thing. How do you feel that correlates in the training aspect? If somebody is running the same reticle all the way across, they're very familiar with that reticle, how does that correlate for you as the instructor if somebody knows their reticle on like the back of their hand?
Yeah, I mean that only makes sense, right? So I mean, consistency breeds accuracy. That comes to your gear too. So having at a minimum the same system or reticle. Don't be running a BDC and your gas gun and running a mill or MOA. Pick something and go with it. I hate BDCs anyhow. I just 2 weeks ago we ran our what we call our mid long range, basically a LPVO course, right, for our carbines. So we're shooting out to 500 yards with carbines, and basically with that, people that were running BDCs, they saw it. I told them, and these are a lot of the guys that came to this course were clients. And with that course, I make everybody take a attack carbine level 1, a level 2, and then you can come to our long range course if you want. So there's prerequisites. So those are clients that have had a lot of experience with them. And I told them, man, you're going to run into a lot of issues with those BDC reticles. Bring what you want, bring what you got, and every single one. I think there was 3 or 4 of them that were running BDCs. Right now we have like 3 optics on order for them because they realize the shortcomings of that BDC. So as much as we can be consistent as possible across our gear selection, it's just going to help, right? That way you're not having to refamiliarize yourself with one thing to the next. It goes back to the reality is we only have so much bandwidth in that little noggin of ours, and you start adding even the slightest bit of complexity, like switching from one optic to another optic. It's taking that bandwidth away, and now your fundamentals and the rest of your shooting performance is going to suffer because you're having to consciously think about something else, right? So whatever that is. So yeah, as more consistent as we can be across all that, it just allows us to free up some of that bandwidth to concentrate on actually hitting the target.
So I agree with you. I do a lot of training with 22 long rifle. Prior to all my matches, um, do you recommend somebody? So let's face reality: 6.5 need more is really hard to find right now. And so 22 long, it's plentiful, it's everywhere, it's relatively inexpensive. How do you feel training with 22 long versus having to shoot all your match ammo or your priority ammo versus not? Does that make sense?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about repetition, right? So, learning theory says, look, to do something correctly, consistently, you have to get 1,000 reps, 1,000 reps at a minimum to be able to do something consciously correct. So I'm still thinking about the trigger, but if I'm still thinking about pulling that trigger and I've done it 1,000 times, I'm going to do it consistently. You need over 5,000 reps to where you can do something correct reps, 5,000 good reps before you can do something subconsciously. So the more grouping drills that we can do with 22 or even a pistol, I mean, all of those, anytime that we're applying those fundamentals and we're getting good repetition and we're building those habits to where we get to a point to where we don't have to think about those, to where again, we're freeing up bandwidth to apply to other tasks that we can do while we're doing that applying those fundamentals, it's going to help. So without a doubt, I mean, you know, shooting 22s, grouping with your, Ruger 1022 has applications and benefits across the board. Dry firing, as long as you have something that gives you feedback, all of those things have a real place and will help you along the way.
Oh, I agree. Do you feel 22 really exposes bad fundamentals? I am a firm proponent of 22 long exposes improper fundamentals and really helps somebody that maybe, let's use yourself as an example, you're an instructor. If you're seeing somebody do bad fundamentals on a 6.5, and let's say the 6.5, like it's bad, but they're still impacting, so you throw them on a 22 and then it's really, really exposed. Have you ever done that before?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Well, I mean, maybe a good example of that is, when I see somebody that I know is flinching, but I
Mhm.
can tell that they're not buying my feedback, right? Like, hey, your problem is that you're flinching, or you're jerking the trigger. They're like, no, or they may never tell you that, but you can see that thought bubble in their head, like, or they start talking about, it's my sights and not. So one of the things I always do, and lots of instructors do, is like, all right, let me see your pistol or whatever it is, and then all right, you reload it. They don't realize it, but there's not a round in the chamber, and now they go to squeeze the trigger, and they're like, So yeah, things like that will highlight some of the flaws that they have. Conversely though, I will say that like one of the biggest problems that people have is recoil management, among other things. And obviously, when you're dealing with shooting 22, you need to make sure that you're identifying what it is that you're trying to achieve, you're trying to affix, and make sure that that is the best mode of doing that. Because obviously, if their problem is they're flinching because of recoil, 22 won't necessarily fix that or expose that. It might actually even make it worse. You need to get them on the 6.5 and figure out what's going on there. But no, I mean, regardless, the reality is getting to a point where you're applying those fundamentals and being able to shoot lots of rounds cheaply. Also, the fact that it's not going to fatigue you as much, so you can get more rounds without getting so smoked. Definitely help as well. So absolutely.
Right. As pretty beat today after we came back from the range. I'm not even gonna lie. And so my 6.5, just food for thought for you. My 6.5 weighs 32 pounds. I've added significant weight to it because when I shoot off a barricade or a tank trap or a floating prop, like a floating table that's suspended by chains, I don't want it to move. And if I can avoid the recoil of causing it to start swinging, then the weight is worth it for me. By no stretch of the imagination, if I had used this rifle to bug out, would it go with me? Like, no stretch of imagination. So it's too damn heavy. Ounces equal pain, ounces equal pounds, and pounds equal pain. No truer statement I've ever heard. So, um, but so let's say I wanted to come to your class tomorrow. Let's just hypothetically speak. You're doing a long range intro one class tomorrow. What gear do I need to bring? Do I need to bring a Kestrel? Do I need to bring a positional bag, a rear support bag? What equipment do I need to come to your class if hypothetically speaking you're doing intro to long range one tomorrow?
You don't need to bring anything because we have everything. Um, no, we put out a gear list, recommended gear list. Obviously, a rifle. But I also intentionally recommend people to use our rifles and our gear, and they don't need to show up with anything for a couple different reasons. Number one, we always go through those rifles. I make sure that we get rid of all the different variables that tend to affect people. A lot of times when, especially if they've never gone to a course, they haven't done a lot of shooting, they show up with a rifle in other gear. a lot of times myself and my instructors will end up spending more time troubleshooting their gear than we should. So typically what I want people to do is focus on learning the fundamentals. So I know using our rifles where we've taken all the, like, I know that just this last course we had a client that suddenly his rings came loose, and his optic was shifting in his rings. I know that's not going to happen with our rifles because I checked those the night before. We go through, we torque everything, we check everything. The other part of that is I really recommend people that are thinking about getting into long range shooting not to go buy a bunch of stuff and come to our course so that they become an educated buyer. I have had clients literally say, Gary, I had a client, he spent like $12,000 worth of gear. He bought a rifle, bought an optic, bought all kinds of stuff. And literally by the end of the classroom portion where I go over what makes a good scope, a good gun, like he was like, man, I wish I would have come here first before I purchased, all this different stuff. So, we have a basic gear list that we put out. Basically a rifle, ammunition, bipods, and really that's it. I mean, that's really all they need. But again, we have gear that we let clients use, and we don't even charge them to use our gear. We just the only thing they're going to pay for is the ammo. Because, and then even on rear bags and things like that, we also have a selection of rear bags to figure out which one works for you. I have 3 or 4 different types of bags that, like for instance, that I know work. Sometimes I like one bag over the other, depending on the shooting position or whatever it is. So, clients get to try several different things. They also, if they, whether they bring their gun or not, there's 5 or 6 different types of rifles that they're going to be able to try and use and figure out what they like for themselves. Same thing with scopes and reticles. Which reticle do you like? Or you may not like this reticle right here, but let's get you some reps on it so you can a Christmas tree reticle, for instance, something like a Horus or something like that. Most people are very overwhelmed by that, but literally all it takes is a day of shooting and you start to see how useful that information that you're seeing that at one time overwhelms you. So, if you're just getting into long range shooting, you're going to come to one of our course. I'm going to encourage you to leave your stuff at home and use our stuff so that we know that if things aren't happening the way they should be, we've reduced that variable down to the shooter. And then also, there's also a measure of somebody showing up and them being concerned about their gear, whether it's going to work right. Their head isn't in the game as far as just being receptive and learning. That they have other things on their mind, whether they think, my gear's inadequate or this or whatever it is. So when it comes to our courses, you don't need anything. Show up, bring a lunch. If you want us to, we can even provide that for you. I don't care.
Gotcha. So I don't think you're very far from me. I'm near Nashville, so I don't think you're too awfully far from me. We're gonna have to do some contacting back and forth where I can get up there for a course. I want to come take some of your courses. You're not too awfully far. But do you feel somebody? I don't use a Kestrel. I'm gonna throw that out there. I know how to read the wind. I know how to do Kentucky windage, things like that. Do you feel like somebody shooting long range needs to have a Kestrel? I personally don't because I've been taught how to read the wind um, by my rifle coach personally. Now, not everybody is given a chance, and so on and so forth. But what about you?
Yeah. So honestly, what I use a Kestrel for is getting density altitude. I think that's probably one of the few things that actually matter. With long range level 1 and 2, long range level 1, we never pull out any real electronics other than the laser rangefinder. I am a big advocate of having a dope book and using dope. You know, I went to sniper school in 2003. Never had a Kestrel there. I actually went to a sniper school in Sinjar Valley, Iraq, where the average wind was. We did the first sniper course in a combat theater since Vietnam was the one that I attended, and we were in the Sinjar Valley of Iraq. and the average wind was like, I don't know, it was ridiculous. It was like well over 20 miles an hour. If you didn't learn to read the wind, you didn't pass. And then we had a huge high percentage rate of failure in that course. Even the instructor said, hey, when you go to the course in Benning, Fort Benning, the average wind is like 8 or less. Um, and they kind of, hey, so you guys didn't pass this course. That doesn't mean you're not good shooters. It just means that the wind gave you trouble. Luckily, myself and my sniper teammate did pass the course, and we learned to read the wind. And I am an advocate of learning to be able to see that mirage. I think that's your greatest tool. Because that test roll, it does give you where the wind reading where you're at. You could have 5 different crosswinds going across there, so you need to be able to look at all that. I do think that I guess I've softened my view toward apps and electronics and long range shooting over the last few years. I used to be very against them, but I do think that they give people a chance to start understanding some of this stuff, maybe in a different way than through just pure experience. I had the benefit of being in the military and having access to basically go to the range whenever I wanted, have thousands and thousands of rounds to shoot, and going through shooting courses and things like that. So it's not fair for me to project my experience on somebody else that doesn't have all of those things afforded to them. So I do think there's a place for apps. And I will say it does seem like even guys that come from the military that kind of have the same background as I do, and probably the same thought process as I do, they're definitely using they're getting ballistic solutions from those apps. Because those, between the apps and knowing when a kestrel, for instance, is useful and when it's not, that may be part of it. But I think learning your initial step, and that's what we do with long range level 1 and 2. Level 2, we go over apps, we go over the use of a kestrel, we kind of familiarize people with those things, say, hey, these things are available to you. You got to figure out if they're going to work for you. You can definitely learn your data using those things. You can also learn, and it's probably the best way to learn, is just through rounds down range and impacts and data collection.
Mhm.
So, but not everybody has the time or the resources necessary to do that. So I do think that there's a place for both.
Gotcha. I
Hopefully that answers your question.
It does, and I agree. There is a time and there is a place for apps, and electronics. I don't disagree with that. I think people become so reliant upon them that it begins to hinder them in the grand scheme of things. Like if they forget their batteries, if they forget this, that, or the third. That's just kind of my opinion, and that's why I generally don't run a Kestrel at all. Is because of that. I've seen it happen too many times where somebody's Kestrel will die out because their batteries are dead, and they just completely forget everything because they haven't confirmed their dope. They're so reliant upon an electronic, and it's like, what are you doing?
I think you're 100% right. If you're at a point to where you're reliant on electronics, you're doing things wrong. Those things should be just enhanced. Have the ability to make up for some experience gaps. But if you're 100% reliant on those, then you're doing it wrong. So you need to have hard data. Every round sent down range should be documented somewhere, um, and you know what you're doing, and being able to look at the data, I think is so helpful, um, and being able to see the kind of the trends that go on with what's going on. Not only that, if you do any shooting with any of these apps or using Kestrel or using any of the ballistic solutions, you find they quite often don't match up. And that's because you don't have, now they have the capability to, if you were able to take down all of the environmentals, wind speeds at different ranges, to account wind grade when you're shooting at at different heights and variance and into magnets and things like that, if you were able to collect all that, which there's no way to do that, and you put it into those ballistic apps, they'd probably give you an exact solution every single time. But you don't have the ability. So, you know, having that information based on experience is a hard copy, and then using some of that information that you're getting off apps or Orchestral to just be able to enhance a little bit. It should be just a little garnish as opposed to the entire meat and potatoes of your knowledge and skill.
Oh yeah, I'm in complete agreement. So the gentleman I was talking about that was having the issues with his Lapua is Mr. Alex here. Um, he's been a long time subscriber. Him and John were my first two subscribers here on my channel. Um, guys, if you haven't checked out Paramount Tactical, go check him out. Alex is actually pretty close to you. Um, I I recommend you guys go check him out. Gary knows his stuff. Gary, very knowledgeable. I appreciate Gary coming on here. So you guys go over there and check out him. So one thing I'm curious about, and I'm sure some of my viewers are, what is your top number one all-time favorite daily pack, concealed carry, everyday carry, essential things that you keep on you as a everyday carry type scenario, and also your preferred EDC concealed carry? Did I lose you? His internet might have crashed. Think we might have lost Gary here for a moment, guys. So, so we've had a conversation with Gary from Paramount Tactical Solutions today. I don't know if his internet's crashed or not, or what's happened. He's frozen on the screen here. So his internet might have crashed. But we'll see if he comes back in here. But yeah, it's been a good conversation. We talked a lot about long range, how fundamentals go hand over foot with each other. With it, a lot of the same stuff that we pretty well preach every time on our channel. So, guys, we are going to see if Gary comes back. If he doesn't, we'll sign off here in the next few minutes. How's Alex been here lately? How have you been, Alex? Getting a bunch of deer. Oh yeah, I'm sure they're eating your all's crops down there right now. Sure, it's been a little rough. Did y'all get everything planted down there, Alex? Down there in the field? You can confirm, well, you can kind of confirm BC with Kestrel and data, but that kind of goes hand over foot with each other. Your BC goes off your data and your dope. So that kind of goes hand over foot with each other, John. So, but all right, guys. Well, I don't mean to cut you short, but I do think I'm going to hop off here. I appreciate everybody stopping by, saying hi, getting in the live chat. So, gotcha. Well, don't stay too busy, Alex. But yeah, I am going to hop off here. I appreciate all you guys for stopping in, saying hi, participating. But don't forget to go check out Paramount Tactical. Gary's good people over there. and I will catch you guys later. See ya. Bye.